Hi everyone, it's Margaret Manning here with 60 and Me. Thanks so much for being here today. I hope you're doing great. I'm really happy that you're here. I love doing these videos for you and hope that you find them of value. And if there's ever anything, by the way, that you want us to talk about that you haven't found yet, please let me know. But on our website, we've got quite a few articles. And if you look at the search button at the top there, you can normally find something on just about everything related to living life to your fullest in your 60s. So thanks again for being here. Now, I'm drinking my cup of tea this morning. I have got my English breakfast tea in my little favorite mug and hope you've got something good to drink or enjoy while we talk. Now, our sponsor for today's show is International Living. They are a company that's helping people retire abroad. They put together a global retirement index every year that explains some options. And if you go out to internationalliving.com and /60andme. There's a video there that you can watch if you like, or just send your email and they'll forward you a link to the guide. And when you get that first email from them, there's a link right at the top of the email. So it's a link to a free article, no cost. So, topic for today. Now, I normally try to choose topics that are of interest to everybody. And, I know that there are things on your mind that, we all share. But this one for me is a little bit personal. And I just wanted to go through it with you because I think a lot of people will be intrigued by this. Now, Jan Moore is one of our bloggers, and she wrote an article on creativity. Now, I have a son who is an artist, and he has, for many, many years, gone through lots of different phases in this passion he has. And of course, it's a very difficult thing to work with because it's hard to make money from it, and it's also emotionally can be very both therapeutic and also very challenging. Most of the artists that I have met, painters, that kind of an artist, are very deep thinkers, and that sometimes gets in the way of the real world. But this article by Jan, I just didn't know some of the information that she shared, so I wanted to go through that with you, and hopefully you'll find it interesting. So, creativity is a topic that she loves too, and she found a research project that NASA, the space organization in the States, put together in 1969. It was a program that they wanted to recruit creative people, innovative people. They were looking specifically for people that could think outside the box and come up with ideas and solutions. And so they asked this man, his name was George Land, Professor George Land, to design a survey or some sort of questionnaire that they could ask people to vet them from an HR perspective for hiring. And so while they were doing this, I think they were not getting too much of a result, but they gave the same test to children, 5 years old. And this is amazing. The children that they showed gave this test to showed that they were, in quotes, creative geniuses. According to this survey that he put together for adults, the children who were 5 were creative geniuses in their responses and so on. And the same test was then given to children as they got a little older. And I'm just making sure I get this right. At age 10, only 30% scored creative genius. Remember, it was 98% of the children who were 5. Then it dropped to 30% at age 10. By 15, the score had dropped to 12. And adults, 25 plus, scored what percentage do you think were, by this test, creative geniuses? 2%. Isn't that amazing? So the thing here, he then went on to examine why that was the case. And of course, we have some ideas, and I'm sure you're all coming up with them, which is the primary one is school. That school takes children who have that 98% creative genius capability, and they put them in a format where they're learning facts and figures and then kind of regurgitating it back in tests. And their intelligence is graded by the test. And the children get sort of shaped into a world where that is how they're considered successful. They're memorizing facts and figures. And then, of course, you go into the workplace and you work most people for someone else. And that boss is probably driven by the profit motive, which is fine. Every business is, but they want you to act and behave the way that they want you to act and behave. And every workplace has its rules, has its guidebook, has its story that you have to follow. And if you don't, you can leave. I mean, that is kind of the black and white reality of working in the real world. And of course, you have to live, you have to earn a salary, you have to, when you get older, have children and have a family, you need money. And so you fall back into that success metric of black and white. So it's interesting, though, that children have this creative genius. And then when you get older, it drops to almost nothing, that we become more functional performers. So those, and the other test that a lot of other research has done is shown that creative people in general now, just adults are happier and more fulfilled in their jobs. So it's a very fascinating study, and Jan then goes on to talk about this sort of, two types of thinking that that kind of people have to almost choose between. One is what's called as convergent thinking is conscious thoughts. They're like things that we, facts, things that we learn. It's the conscious mind working. That's the kind of conscious thinking that everybody has to do. It's like you have to live it. The other kind of thinking, though, is creative thinking, or they call it divergent thinking. And this is where you have lots of ideas, you put them all together, and then after you had your brainstorming and your creative inspiration, then you sit down and have this convergent thinking where you bring it together, you plan out which one's going to work best for you, and as an artist or whatever, how you're going to make that work in the real world. So that sort of convergent and divergent thinking is, in a way, the ideal mix. So, for example, Einstein, I think they did an autopsy of his brain, and they found that he had a very active brain. His brain was working on both sides. And that's, I think, indicative that there's many quotes from him about how, the creativity comes from, this kind of out of the box, nonsense kind of thinking. And, so anyway, Jan goes on in this article. I encourage you to read it. It's actually very, very interesting. It's all about, let your mind run free as a creative thinker, and then come back and sit down and, and deal with it giving it form, giving it structure in the real world. And she says it's especially important in this time of, where things are so chaotic, where there's not, the way that people work is changing. Millennials are very aware of this, that the old days, in quotes, of working for 30 years for someone and then retiring, that isn't how it's done anymore. So a lot of them are actually working in more divergent thinking, more creative brainstorming. Another thing that Jan talks about are some things you can do, some exercises that you can do to kind of help yourself become more creative, or help you express your creativity, become a creative genius, or closer to that definition. And one is, for example, to meditate. That's a great practice where you are just focusing on what's important, letting lots of different thoughts come in, and then settling them down and then examining them. Another way is to look at items and, like say, okay, I'm looking at this card. What else could I use this card for? What could I do with this card? It's got printed, writing on it. Could I use it as a doorstop? Could I use it as something to draw on? Could I use it for inspiration? And just a paper clip or a wooden box. What could you do with a wooden box? And think about all the things you could do with a wooden box. And just get your mind going way, way, way out there. And then, okay, I'm going to use the wooden box for my tea. So whatever it is. But art, as Jan says, can be a form of meditation. Art, for example, is a great form of therapy and healing. It's a way for people who are troubled in some way, depressed or anxious or dealing with social anxieties, which many artists do feel that way. They can use their art as a therapy. And it also helps not just artists, painters, but people that do quilting or sewing or knitting. It can just help you connect with your deeper self. I can't remember, I think it was one of our other bloggers wrote an article about this, Nicole Christina, about knitting as a therapy, as a way of going deep. I really like the idea, actually, and it allows for self-expression. So by going deep in yourself, you can actually discover yourself and also help the world. It's kind of becoming a creative genius is not abstract or nebulous. It's a way to break through ideas, blockages. And I know there's a famous quote by Einstein about you can't solve problems by coming up with in the same context that you created the problem. You have to think outside of the box. So I think artists and people that are creative souls really will help the world in bigger ways than we know, perhaps. But we have to give them some support, I suppose, because that's not an easy path to take. But anyway, I thought that was a great article, Jen. Thank you so much for writing that and for giving us this inspiration. What do you think? I mean, do you think would you consider yourself a creative? Not so much a creative genius, but do you consider yourself a creative person? And if so, what do you do? What's your creative outlet? What do you do? Would you meditate, or would you do some art as a means of healing and therapy? Leave your comments in the section below. I'd love to know how many creative souls and creative artists and creative geniuses we have out there in our community. I have a feeling we have a lot. But take very good care, everybody. I hope you have a great day. Have another cup of tea or coffee, and then just go out and do something wild and wonderful. Take good care. We'll talk again soon. Bye for now.